Stephen Calloway once said, "A weapon does not decide whether or not to kill. A weapon is a manifestation of a decision that has already been made." Keep this in mind as we discuss today the decision of the United States to proceed with a $20 million sale of F-16 to Turkey. And what does it mean for the future of global relations between the West and the East? My name is Dr. David Waralu.
And my name is Elizabeth Ann Stewart.
And you are watching Geopolitics in Conflict.
A country that openly defies Washington, D.C. It buys Russian weapons, it attacks American allies, it slams American hegemony. What does the U.S. do in return? It sells weapons to Turkey.
We should sell them the F-16 jets and modernize those jets as well. It's not in our interest not to do that, and I indicated to them that I've not changed my position at all since December.
The world is random, meaningless, chaos, or is it? How do some of the best, wealthiest, and most powerful people seem to know what's coming before it happens? Well, one way is that they create the circumstances in their favor, but the other is that they know how to read the world's stage and spot patterns and trends in key areas. They don't get lost in the overwhelm of endless information. They know what's important to pay attention to using their own formulas, and most importantly, they know where to put that information to actually make it usable. Would you like to be able to do the same thing? Well, we have a course that teaches you to do that exact same thing. It's called No Nonsense Politics. So if you want the leg up that some of the world's brightest have, as well as an online community of people who think for themselves just like you, check it out. Link in the description box below.
All right.
All right.
What's going on with this topic here?
So the US administration, the Biden administration, just petitioned Congress to prepare a $20 billion sale of F-16 fighters to Turkey.
Just to give you background, this is nothing new.
Yeah.
This F-16 deal was part of a package that Turkey has purchased way before. We tend to delay the delivery of certain things. So this one is not new, but it created tensions a couple years ago between the United States and Turkey when Turkey went ahead and purchased the S-400 missile systems from Russia. And why is that important? Is because S-400 missile systems, those have the capability of tracking the radars of NATO stuff. So, what Turkey is a member of NATO.
Yep.
And that's what the push was against. They, NATO, the US that is, tried to convince Turkey back then to back down. Turkey said no.
Yeah.
The US retaliated by cutting off the training of pilots for F-35. I was familiar with the F-35s because when I used to go to one location in the US, we used to have the F-35s test flights, and so I used to see.
I bet that was kind of cool in its own right.
It was, except that I knew back then the problems with F-35s.
Yeah.
Major problems.
What were the problems?
Well, those are more technical stuff. It just, to me was, and I'm not an engineer, I don't understand, I'm not an aerodynamic stuff, that's not my area. The only thing I got from the conversation is that for a cost of $1 billion, that's how much cost to.
Oh my gosh.
But it wasn't performing at the level.
Yeah.
So you compare that to for example, the Su-57, the Russians one, which can maneuver in ways far beyond what you can even imagine. But anyway, the US went ahead and cut off the training of the Turkish pilot. That was what triggers the problem between Turkey and the US. Because Turkey is an important ally in NATO.
Absolutely.
For one reason and one reason only, strategic location.
Strategic location, yep.
That's it, because where it is in comparison to the other, it's right in the middle, east and west. So, but the recent developments that's going on with why all of a sudden U.S. wants, or President Biden wants to do this now, it also has to do with what's going on right now between NATO and Russia.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a huge piece of this.
It is a big one.
So let's dive into that for a second, because Turkey continues to block Sweden and Finland from NATO.
That is correct. And as a matter of fact, and I just read something about the Swedish Supreme Court that refused to deport a particular guy by the name Kenneth. His name is Kenneth, he's a journalist, but he's wanted by the Turkish government. So the Turkish government is asking for his extradition, and Swedish High Court said no. So Turkey is saying, well, if you don't turn in not only that guy, Turkey wanted about 143 individuals living in Sweden and Finland.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really a lot.
I know. Well, you don't hear much about this in the
you
Western
don't hear
media. They
anything
won't
about
disclose
that.
this. I was very familiar with the case because I used to live in Pennsylvania back then. And who lives in Pennsylvania is Fethullah Gulen. Fethullah Gulen was the most wanted person by the Turkish government who got exiled. You know, I was very familiar with his case because he exiled to the US back in 1999. So I was very familiar with his. As a matter of fact, the town where he used to live, still live there, was closer to where I used to live. This is the reason why now all of a sudden the US decided to do this.
Yeah.
Is the US bribing Turkey basically?
I mean, basically, yes. I think that's a pretty safe thing to assume.
Well, yeah, because NATO and the US, well, US is NATO, so they wanted Sweden and Finland very bad into, which I've always argued it would not be a smart move for Sweden and Finland.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So first of all, why do Sweden and Finland really want in? And then is that really the right course of action for them?
No.
Is that in their best interest?
I think Sweden and Finland were pressured. Because here's the thing, like we always say, you look at the trend, right? Sweden and Finland have lived with the Soviet Union and Russia for 50 years in peace.
Yeah.
And the reason, because it traced back to the war between the Soviet Union and Sweden, by which Sweden declared neutrality.
Neutrality. And that's always been a big thing for Sweden, to be neutral.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Apparently, this seems to be pressured. There are those who argue that Swedish people are really torn between, well, if we don't become a NATO, Russia's going to invade. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's a spewing. Most people do not even understand the true content of invasion.
Yeah.
You know. Because if we look at it, and we'll say it straightforward, if we look at the current conflict in Ukraine, of course the term is invasion.
Right.
But did Russia ask for the removal of the Ukrainian government?
Yeah.
Did they occupy?
Yeah.
They didn't.
They didn't.
So it's kind of, we gotta be fair and we gotta be logic in our arguments.
Yeah.
So in Western media, because we connotate or we link every military action to invasion, especially when it comes down to a foreign country. So that was some arguments made in Sweden. Others saying, well, wait a minute. We lived with Soviet Union and Russia during the height of the Cold War. Do you know that during the height of the Cold War, there were about 7,391 nuclear warheads in Europe? At the height of the Cold War.
Terrifying to think about.
And here's the thing. Even with all that, Sweden and Finland were neutral. They didn't join NATO. They didn't want to. They didn't. So all of a sudden, they changed in course.
Yeah.
Well, of course, just to tie it back to Turkey, the protocol, the way it works in NATO, is that no member can be added or admitted till everybody approves.
Yep. And Turkey is standing directly in the way of that.
Well, because one country can object to. So all Turkey is asking now is that for Finland and Sweden to turn in the 143 individuals. But as I said, Supreme Court in Sweden already said, why not turn in that guy over?
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, do you think that that's legitimate, that that's really the reason that Turkey has been withholding? Do you think that it's just these people, or do you think they're really trying to do some other kind of strategic move?
There are two sides to that. The main reason is the extradition of those individuals. The reason being because the Turkish government is saying that those were parts of the failed coup in 2016. And I remember that because I was invited to a TV station to do an interview about it. So I was very familiar with the case itself. And Turkey, as a matter of fact, Turkey at that point said this is orchestrated also by the US behind closed doors. Turkey is one of those the odd player in NATO.
Yeah.
It's a NATO member, but also it can play a different role. In global politics, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Turkey is going to have to look for its own interest. But also because the behavior of Turkey, you always have to understand it within their cultural and political landscape. Well, there's the upcoming presidential elections in Turkey. Is Erdogan wants to make sure he cement his power?
Yeah.
Most likely,
probably
most
yes.
likely it is the
Yeah,
case.
it turns out politicians don't want to give up their
Exactly.
positions.
But also you're going to have to look at Turkey from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by this? Turkey now is offering to mediate between Russia and the West regarding Ukraine.
That's very interesting.
So, well, because Russia mediated between Turkey and Syria.
Yeah.
It's the dynamics.
Yeah.
It's just the dynamics aspects of it. So Turkey is realizing it's to our benefit. We'll play both sides here and there. Of course, that can damage your credibility.
Absolutely.
That's
well,
one.
and it kept the fighters from actually being fulfilled on before now.
Exactly, yeah. But the U.S. looking at it differently because the U.S. thinking if, most likely, there's no confirmation yet, by the way, that Congress will approve this.
Absolutely. That's right.
You have one hardcore in the U.S. Foreign Relations Committee, Menendez.
Yeah, Menendez.
Menendez is a Democrat. He's the high-ranking
Yeah.
officer. He is the one that is hawkish on Turkey. And he's
Yes.
saying no.
Yeah.
So it will be interesting how that's going to play out given where the U.S. political landscape is.
Yeah. Well, so I have a quote from him actually.
Yeah.
He said, talking about Turkey, he says, "How do you reward a nation that does all of those things?" Right? So everything that Turkey is doing. And he said, "I don't see it. Now, if they want to start changing their ways, that's a different story." Right? So this is a very specific message. This isn't just a like, oh, well, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
No, they want behavior change. This is a call for behavior change for Turkey. Are they going to do it or not?
No. Turkey won't do it because Turkey knows that all the strategic cards is in its favor. You know, especially that's why they went ahead with the acquisition of the S-400 missile system from Russia.
Absolutely,
Because that's play
yeah.
both sides. As a matter of fact, the Turkey now is moving forward with building its own military hardware.
Yeah.
They are developing some.
I apologize if I pronounce this wrong, but the Özgür project to modernize the F-16 Block 30 fleet and circumvent the undeclared sanctions.
Yeah, they are moving forward with that. As a matter of fact, some drones now used in Ukraine are Turkish.
That's interesting.
It's
Yeah.
business.
Yeah,
That's how
it is.
they look.
And you can only block someone for so long.
Exactly.
Before they start to figure out their own
Yeah.
solutions to these problems. And it looks like that's what Turkey is doing.
Yeah, and this is why when we look at, most Americans won't even pay attention to this kind of stuff. So when we hear about a $20 billion deal for F-16, first of all, it's not new.
Yeah.
That was, we still have to give them some other stuff from their purchases before.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a NATO member. So which means all NATO members will have to fall under certain conformity. They have to conform.
Yeah, they have to conform.
Their military will have to fall under certain conformity within all NATO because if you know anything about NATO is that it's always under the command of a 4-star US general. NATO will never be under the command of any other entity.
Well, the
It's just the way it
US,
works.
out of all of the countries in NATO, who has the biggest military? Out of all the world, who has the biggest military?
Yeah, you mean as far as budget?
Yeah.
Not numbers.
Yeah, as far as
Yeah, because you look at China number-wise,
right,
it's different.
right.
North Korea number-wise is different.
Right.
Iran number-wise.
Well,
as far as
budget-wise.
as far as budget, you are absolutely correct. It's NATO. As a matter of fact, it's the U.S. that is paying the bulk of NATO's budget.
Right,
And
which I think most people don't know.
Yeah, and it's worth questioning and asking about. Why are we sending our tax dollars for us to support whatever country? Because most those countries do not put this much in their defense budget, so they're using their money for something that benefits them.
Right.
So why are we?
No, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And when you look at sort of the propaganda machine, there always has to be a moral reason.
Yeah.
Because for any kind of altercation, because the moral reason is what sort of gets the people involved and allowing that process to continue. And quite frankly, that's what also that has happened over and over again throughout history. But I think we did a show on this, if you guys want to check it out, but it was on Russia saying that this is a proxy war between the US and Russia through NATO.
And it became evident that it was going that direction. It just, I mean, I look at, for example, back then during the Soviet Union presence in Afghanistan and how we went about behind the scenes pushing to the point of taking the whole conflict in a different direction altogether. So it's the same thing that is going on right now in Ukraine.
Yeah.
The only thing is that the Europeans have no say into this.
Yeah.
They can't. The EU, when I say EU, I'm referring to the countries who claim to be the leaders in Europe. They have no say because they are politically weak.
Yeah.
They couldn't.
They are.
Now you're hearing about the EU is going to have a trade war with the US. How far that's going to go? It just. But the idea of NATO, as far as the budget itself, we are the ones supporting the existence.
Yeah.
And yes, there are those who've been asking, what is the mission of NATO now that the Soviet Union ceased to exist?
Absolutely. Well, they seem to have found a new mission.
Yeah.
At least a perceived new mission, because if you don't have a perceived threat, if you don't have a perceived enemy.
Well, except that this time around, I have great concerns.
Yeah.
I have great concerns. And when I wrote the Russia book, I remember I put one section there about what if the possibility of pushing Russia to the corner, what Russia will do.
Yeah.
And my sense is that with these tactics now, because you look at, for example, just to give you an example, the UK just proved to send Apache helicopters, or considers, I'm sorry.
And heavy tanks, I think, too.
Yeah, the tanks going to be coming from Poland. But those tanks are the previous generation, which stand nothing. But all this is consideration.
Yeah.
And the key word into this is the word consideration. Why is this important for you to understand? It's because Western governments wants to give the perception that we are going to be supporting Ukraine no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean,
it
became a joke when you say we're fighting the Russians till the last Ukrainians. Well, it is true.
Absolutely.
But the idea of sending Apache helicopter, that's going to be crossing the red line.
Yeah.
So sending advanced missile systems, that's going to be crossing red line. And this is what when I wrote the book, I was thinking in terms of what if. And here it is.
Yeah.
Because that scenario now, we are in the middle of it. What if?
Yeah.
So, and that's where my concern is. And Europeans do not realize how deep they dig themselves into.
Yeah.
Not only economically, but also politically.
Politically.
Yeah. So with the colossal energy crisis that's going on right now in Europe, how are they going to come out of that?
That's a great question.
I just don't see. And if you add one more elements to this, that has to do with now just our ally Saudis agreed now to use the Yuan instead of the dollar.
Oh man, that's huge.
You can just see where this is going. So sometimes in when it comes to global affairs and geopolitics, you always have to think far ahead. If they keep pushing Russians to the corner, Russia will react.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing that happen right now. We're seeing what you sort of outlined in your Russia book. You outlined a lot of what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's because you're seeing, you almost, the way I always look at it when I used, not use, but I still write. When I write, usually I think of it like a landscape.
Yeah.
I put a landscape in front of me and start to think about the possibilities.
Yeah.
So that's how I write. I write based on what I see on the landscape. So that's where I saw it going. So just to go back to our topic about Turkey and US. So the move for that is because US wants to ensure that Turkey does not get too close to Russia.
Yep.
Well, guess what? They're going to get close to Russia.
Yeah, and it seems like that's already happening.
Yeah, but also because they're going to work out a gas deal. Did you know?
Gas.
Did you know that if Europe wants gas, it has to go through Turkey?
Wow. Well...
And Turkey will have to have its cut of it.
Yeah.
There is nothing in international affairs that's done for free.
Yeah. Nothing.
None.
And no one should expect anything for free.
No.
And I don't think that even the US is looking for that. They're looking for how can we sort of manage this situation.
Yeah.
And it seems almost like this is a ploy to try and get whatever it is that they want.
Isn't that saying that goes, keep your enemy close, but your...
Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer.
Yeah. So relations between the U.S. and Turkey have always been strained. Anyway, no matter what you hear. I used to talk to a friend of mine in the military. I was very familiar with, was some high-ranking officer, and it was always the conversation that we always had tensions with the Turks because they never. It's just always been the norm, and when the thing you have to consider the importance of Turkey because that's where our nukes are.
Yeah.
We
that's
have nukes,
hugely important.
Yeah, we have nukes in 5 countries in Europe.
Yeah.
Belgium, Dutch, Germany, Italy, and Turkey.
Yeah.
Except with Italy has 2 Air Force bases where we split the number of weapons between the 2 bases. So there are 6 locations, but only 5 countries. Well, Turkey has the nukes has U.S. nukes. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, and I wrote an article about it. I might put the link for you guys. And the article was about we had to move the nukes from that location to another. And the concern was that I raised back then, what about the theft?
Yeah, that's a huge concern.
So I wrote an article about it back then, I remember. And I was invited to a TV station to talk about this one without going into the detail of it, what type of weapons. But we did have the weapons in Incirlik. It's called the Incirlik base. There are some still there, but we moved them to different locations. So that's the importance of Turkey. That's why Turkey plays a strategic role.
Yeah.
Of course, what you hear about the Menendez and all this, that's political, domestic squabbling stuff.
Yeah.
But overall, they'll move forward with the deal. Otherwise, Turkey will consider the other direction.
Turkey seems to have some actual leverage. They seem to have some, not a lot of leverage, right? Because against the US, who really does have leverage.
Yeah.
But they seem to have some leverage.
Well, I look at it the last 15 years and how their relationship has developed with the Russians. It improved very fast.
Yeah.
Even when it comes down to an issue as contentious as it could be like Syria, they reach an agreement.
Yeah.
They reach an agreement, the 3 of them. Whoever thought Turkey will back down, and it did, because Russians convinced them.
Yeah.
But I am sure they got something back for it.
I'm
That's
sure
just
they
how
did.
it works.
I'm sure they
That's
did.
just how it works. So it would be interesting to see what those developments moving forward. But so far, Turkey is moving forward with its military hardware.
Yeah.
And of course, acquiring the Russian systems, not all of them, because Turkey still has to maintain the specificity of certain weapons based on NATO. But they're going to be looking for their own interest anyway.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it's very clear that they seem to be actually
that's
doing
the norm.
that.
So yeah. Any final thoughts?
That's it.
No? All right. Well, I hope you guys understand at least now when you read a headline that says U.S. might approve $20 billion of F-16s. Don't get surprised, or that's just part of the norm of political way of how they can maneuver each other. So we hope you find it informative and look forward to seeing you next time. As always, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.